This is an introduction to the AP Language Rhetorical Analysis essay. This is the second essay on the second half of the exam. The rhetorical analysis essay asks students to examine the writer's rhetorical choices, to explain that analysis in a line of reasoning, and to demonstrate an understanding of the rhetorical situation. When we say rhetorical choices, we mean any technique, any strategy that an author might be using. This is not an exhaustive list, but this should give you an idea of a couple of things that might be considered a technique that an author might use. When we're talking about nonfiction, we would also talk about ethos, logos, and pathos. However, in your analysis, you wouldn't really say that an author uses ethos as much as you would say that an author shares personal information in order to establish credibility. Likewise, you wouldn't say that an author uses pathos as much as you would say that an author's particular use of an example helps to create sympathy or anger or humor or whatever that mood or feeling might be. Anything that the author does is a technique. And you don't need to worry about memorizing these lists of techniques or trying to find the most obscure technique, the most academic technique. What matters more is that you understand how these techniques are functioning in the text. If you don't know the name of something, you simply describe whatever it is that you see that is important. For example, if you saw we, our, and us in an author's text and you thought that they were important because they were unifying or they had a unifying effect, you might call that inclusive language. Or you might say that those were collective pronouns. If you couldn't think of either of those terms, you could just give a longer description and say, these are pronouns that unify the author with her audience. That's the rhetorical choice part. For a line of reasoning, we're going to follow the same general structure that we follow in all of our other argumentative essays. There's a supporting claim, there's evidence, and there's commentary. For rhetorical analysis, that supporting claim is going to be the author's technique or choice and how it accomplishes some part of the author's message and or purpose. For evidence, rather than using research, we're going to go ahead and quote from the text an example of that technique doing that thing that we said that it was doing in our supporting claim. For the commentary, we'll explain why that technique is important, why it works or doesn't work for the supporting claim or for the overall claim. That's what we mean by a line of reasoning. We'll connect this to the rhetorical situation, either the writer, the message, purpose, audience, exigence, context, or subject. You can use any of those. However, I recommend that we focus on message and purpose because depending on the prompt that you receive, you might not know who the writer is and they might not give you enough background that you can rely on that. Likewise, you might not be familiar with this period of history in US history or world history, and so the context can be difficult to rely on as well. The message and the purpose, however, will always be in the text that's in front of you. That's something that you can rely on and that you can figure out. So let's focus on those. In our supporting claim, we're going to tie this to the rhetorical situation by using what I call a TMP sentence. And that's simply an acronym to stand for the technique being tied to the message and the purpose. So let's assume that you are reading a text and you see that this particular author uses powerful words and stereotypes. And we would consider some of the verbs that we might use as well to talk about this in our analysis. Too many students rely on the verb use or does. And so again, not an exhaustive list, but this should give you an idea of other words that you can choose as you're trying to describe how the author is working with these particular techniques. So here's a poor example. Friedman, our author, uses diction and stereotypes as a way of getting your attention and making you feel bad about stereotypes. This is problematic for a number of reasons. One, we're using this term diction. Again, we're trying to focus on impressing someone with our understanding of an obscure name for a technique. Really, diction just means word choice. And so we're not saying much other than the author is using words, which most authors do use. We're also using as a way of getting your attention. It's a little bit too casual for our verb choice. We have the pronoun your and you, which makes an assumption about who our reader is. And we're tying that to their reaction rather than to the message or the purpose, saying that whoever our reader was had their attention riveted by this piece, and then they felt bad about the stereotypes that were being used. We can't prove that. We have no idea who our reader is, and we don't know how they felt about this text after they read it. We can improve this. Friedman uses diction and stereotypes to show how the people don't really appreciate the academic types. So we've swapped out our verb to show, which is a little bit better than as a way of getting your attention. We certainly have improved this by switching out the your and the you for people. That's a great choice. And now we're doing a better job of not linking this argument to the audience's reaction, but linking it to either the message or the purpose of Friedman. We can still improve this again. Friedman uses strong language and common stereotypes as a way of detailing how the general public looks down upon the average intellectual in the United States. So strong language is going to be an improvement from diction because it's more specific. Common stereotypes, we could accuse me of being a little bit redundant and saying that stereotypes really are common, but I include that because I like the rhythm that the sentence creates with the parallel structure matching up with strong language. So strong adjective, language, noun, common adjective, stereotypes, noun. Strong language, common stereotypes. Detailing is going to be a more specific verb, and then we've got a more academic and more professional tie to the message. General public looks down upon the average intellectual in the United States. So, to recap, rhetorical analysis is explaining how an author's choices in technique establish their message or accomplish their purpose. Anything can be a technique. It doesn't really matter what the name is, it matters how it's functioning. If you can explain that, then you're well on your way. The same general structure for our other essays applies to the rhetorical analysis. We have a supporting claim, we have evidence, and we have commentary. The supporting claim is best explained with a TMP sentence, a technique that's tied to the message and or purpose. Once you can identify the techniques that an author is using in a text and you can tie those to the message or purpose, you're ready to write your thesis statement and go throughout your overall analysis in your essay.